achieved.
You know, I'm not a type of guy who goes out and listens to all kinds of different podcasts and reads different breakdowns. I will catch some here and there. I try not to let too many people influence who I'm predicting, because I find more often than not, you know, if I'm on the fence about a fight, not so much if I'm on the fence, I will read people and take what they have to say into account. But once in a while, I'll have a prediction where it's like, I like this fighter, and I'll go read someone else who'll make some excellent, good points, and it'll steer me away from my original pick. And I'm not saying it's because I'm right on him. It's just I feel like this is what happens in most situations, and then suddenly, bang, here I am on the wrong end of a prediction I initially had right. But I am briefly talking about here is there just seems like a lot of people when I go through, I respect the people who give you, who break down either all the fights in a card or the vast majority of them. I see there's a lot of people out there who will give you one pick per card. That's it. That's all they'll promote. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 picks per month on a month that has 3 to 4 cards. And I look at it, I see that as cherry picking. I understand why people do that. It's a sound business approach to capping, but to me, I just don't quite. I don't respect that as much as a person who puts the work in. And I'm not saying it's because of the way I do it. Just I'd rather somebody put the work in and provide their predictions for all the fights and their explanations and say, look, this is the best I can do. This is what we're going to come up with. And if I'm right, I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I see people look at, for example, I've seen a number of people look at the Gaethje Vick main event and go, it's too hard a fight to predict. I'm not touching it. Well, then what's that say about your analytical skills and your ability to break down fights and analyze and look at scenarios and determine out of the two fighters which one is the better pick? If you can come up with an edge or a lean based on what you find in your research, then suddenly that the value in a fighter and value in a prediction becomes that much greater because you found something. And yeah, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. But again, I strongly encourage people who are looking to do predictions and post stuff to be that type of predictor who puts their ass on the line and says, this is who I'm backing, and this is who I'm not backing. This is what we're going to go with. Not, I'm going to pick, one fight, Mickey Gall against George Sullivan's my one fight for the month. I'm going to take Mickey Gall by submission or whatever. And I'm not touching anything else this month. It's just lazy predicting. I'm sure I'll get some hate for that. Either way, welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 135 event from Lincoln, Nebraska, going down on August 25th. All of my preliminary predictions, as per usual, will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. All of my main card picks available on this episode of the show. My bet pack. You'll be able to pick up the last one for this subscription for $15. I'm coming off a show where, I was just on the cusp. I won several solid bets. I had TJ Dillashaw as my #1 gold play. That was a nice pickup. I had a nice silver with Alex Perez and Pedro Munoz. I had Pedro Munoz also winning by decision, but I just had a couple of fights that just didn't quite go my well. Polyana Viana dropping a fight. I had her paired up with Hanato Moicano, so that was unfortunate. There was just a couple other things that just didn't quite work out for me. Marlon Vera, I had him by submission. Instead, he gets a TKO finish, and that would have been a nice pickup. So it was one of those nights where it was close, but not quite a profitable night that I like to brag about. Either way, we've done well recently. Of course, at UFC on Fox, we took home 142 units for the big reward bundle. UFC Fight Night 133, we took home 60 units for the big bankroll bundle, 46 units for the big reward bundle. So we've had some good success recently, and we look to keep it rolling. On that note, let's head to that first main card prediction. Fight number 1 on the main card takes place in the UFC's middleweight division as Eryk, ya boy, Anders, 10-1, takes on Tim Williams, 15-4-0. Anders is coming off his first career loss, a split decision main event defeat against Lyoto Machida. I had Machida to upset him in that fight. I thought it was a very close fight. Won me a lot of money when Machida came through. He had won back-to-back UFC bouts to begin his career. For Williams, he competed on The Ultimate Fighter, didn't make the cut. Initially, he's had a good regional record overall. His only losses coming to Anthony Smith in back-to-back bouts and Dustin Jacoby. He had 5 wins in a row before his KO loss to Oscar Biota in his debut. Physically, Williams 1 inch taller, 1 inch reach advantage, 1 year older, and the odds are massively in favor of Eryk Anders in this fight. Anders is a former football player. He's a plus athlete, and he's really looking to round himself into form as a complete mixed martial artist. He KO'd Rafael Natal in his debut. He won 6 of his first 9 fights by knockout, plus a 33-second submission. He's used to quick finishes. and that's something that's worth noting. In his win over Markus Perez, it was a win. He found out he can't knock everyone out. Machida, the 5-round fight in Brazil, it's a great experience for a guy like that to fight 5 rounds and to compete, and you don't win, and he should grow from that. He landed 79 strikes in the Perez fight. He only landed 32 against Machida. I'd say he was pacing himself, preparing for 5 rounds. He did pick up 3 takedowns in that bout. Again, it's important to learn how to win fights without knockouts, and that's worth looking at. Overall, he has power in his left hand. He can throw power with his right as well. He likes to create a little bit of chaos when he attacks, press forward, big swings. He'll chase his opponent at times. He does his best work, especially against Natal when he cut off the cage and landed against him. Against Perez, he was closing the distance with regularity, clinching up, landing short punches, knees in the clinch as well. He does pretty good work when he gets his opponent backed up and limited overall with their space. Now, looking at Williams here, actually his nickname is the Strangler. It's escaping me at the mind, which it makes sense. He has 9 wins by submission, including 5 by rear naked choke. The rest are basically by choke as well. He likes to push forward, close the distance, and drag his opponent to the floor, either submit them or score a decision with top position pressure. Now, Williams, he's not going to shy away from trading on the feet with Anders here because he ultimately needs to close the distance. That's the best way to do it, close it behind his punches. He did in his last fight against Piotr. He didn't use a lot of head movement. He traded and got finished, and he does have 3 losses by knockout compared to just 2 wins. He leaves his chin up, and generally speaking, it is shaky. He tends to not move his head too much, so he is exposed when they are trading. I think ultimately he's going to struggle to outmuscle on Eryk Anders in this fight, and he's not going to match his athleticism. Anders, he could slow down, but Williams is going to have to avoid a lot of the heat coming his way for a prolonged period of time before he gets Anders to slow down. His focus on moving forward and getting to the clinch and trying to grapple Eryk is going to put him in the firing range of the big power. I think Anders is going to, either back him up or catch him moving forward. Either way plays right into his hands. And my prediction is Eryk Anders to defeat Tim Williams by knockout. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the UFC's flyweight division, the very shooken up and interesting UFC flyweight division, as the former title challenger in 6th ranked John Moraga, 19-6-0, takes in the 14th ranked Deiveson Figueiredo with an undefeated record of 14 wins and no losses. Now, Moraga has rallied. The guy seemed like he was down and out. He had 3 straight defeats. He has since won 3 consecutive fights, knocking out highly touted prospect Bibliotov, and the decision win over Wilson Hayes in his most recent bout. And for Figueiredo, he has won 3 in a row as well since coming to the UFC. A TKO win over Marco Beltran, and also Morales stopping him in his last fight. He had a split decision win over Jared Brooks in between there, which saw him give up a boatload of takedowns, but overcome it with his pressure and power on the feet. Now, from Moraga, he's much taller. Figueiredo will have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he happens to be the younger man by 3 years. Now, this is a big fight for both men, considering the fact we have a new champion in this division. Moraga is looking to get a shot after losing to DJ, and now that he knows DJ's gone, I still think it's fairly improbable, but he has a very good chance to move up and contend now. A much better chance, especially if he gets a victory here. For Figueiredo, he's looking to finish another opponent in impressive fashion and start building his name towards that top 10, eventually the top 5. He's not that far away. For Moraga, his hands have been his key to his resurgence. Against Wilson Hayes, he outlanded him 46-12. Against Mokhtarian, he outlanded him 56-12. And, of course, knocking out Bibliotov as well. He's looked much better on the feet, more confident. Conversely, in his defeats, he's landed similar totals offensively, but his foes were much more active, and we're having a lot of success landing strikes. One of the techniques I've really seen from him recently, and overall it's been one of his better techniques throughout his UFC career, are his inside low kicks. It kept Wilson Hayes off balance. He's willing to go high as well, but every time he tagged him, it just seemed to disrupt him and throw him off, and that was a good technique to use. Now, Moraga, he's also a wrestler, but he's actually had major issues defensively. Wilson Hayes took him down 8 times. Of course, DJ took him down 12 times. Benavidez put him on his back 4 times. Even Justin Scoggins scored a trio of takedowns in that matchup. Now, Moraga is pretty good at getting back up once taken down. He will scramble to a better position and won't stay on his back. And, of course, he has a very good guillotine. If you stick your head in, he will grab it, and he will pick up a victory that way. Now, Figueiredo, he has shown he can land takedowns. He had 2 against Beltran, 2 against Moraes. He had a nice trip to Morales. He had a nice trip down against Joseph Morales in his last fight. He uses his size and strength, in close to really control them and get him off balance before taking him down. Once on the ground, he's pretty good at holding the position. He will do damage as well. He ultimately wore out Beltran on the mat, and he had some good success against Morales with his top position strikes. Ultimately, Figueiredo's bread and butter is still his power punching. He hurt Morales with a left jab. He's got 7 wins by knockout overall. A lot of what he throws has, damaging capability. He had 8 first-round finishes overall in his career, which does raise some questions about his inability to compete deeper in bouts, but he has gone 2 or more rounds in 4 of his last 5 fights and looked pretty good doing it. He's not a high volume striker, but he's aggressive and he keeps pressure on, and I like that. He kind of fights at a pace that works for him. He will spin. I think in his last fight, the threat of the power certainly kept Morales tight and unwilling to unload and exchange. He got the finish on the feet in that fight again, kept him backing up before putting him away. Moraga, he's had issues when opponents attack, and he's tried to sit back and counter, and he ultimately lets them get off first. Figueiredo's not the type of guy you want to allow to dictate the exchanges and dictate the pace, and let him land first. Figueiredo is aggressive. He's going to pressure. He's going to land power. He's going to mix in takedowns if needed. He needs to watch his neck again. Moraga's guillotine is very good. And, Moraga's been knocked out once before. He's been hurt in fights. I think we can see something similar again. So my prediction is Deiveson Figueiredo to defeat John Moraga by TKO. Fight number 3 in the main card takes place in the UFC's welterweight division as the juggernaut Jake Ellenberger, 31-14-0, takes on Bam Bam Bryan Barberena, 13 wins, 5 losses, and no draws. Now, Ellenberger is fighting at home in Nebraska. The last time he fought here in the UFC, he beat Diego Sanchez in 2012. It's the only time the Octagon has come home, or at least the only time he's fought there. He is coming off his 3rd straight knockout loss. He has been finished in 6 of his last 7. He is a shell of his former self, going back to the Diego win. He has 5 knockouts, 5 losses by knockout. He is 2-8 in his last 10 defeats. It feels like a retirement fight, fighting home. It's one of those things where he just fought so poorly and struggled so much of late, where he basically said, give me one more fight. And there's also that thing, we got to look back, 2014, Barberena stopped Jake's brother Joe, Ellenberger, so there could be a bit of an element of revenge there as well. Barberena, he's coming off a loss to Leon Edwards, who's a fighter that's certainly climbing, who also recently defeated Donald Cerrone. He also lost to Colby Covington, another big fighter of note in the division. He has wins over Sage Northcutt, Warlley Alves, which is a big upset, and Joe Proctor. So Barberena's carved in a little niche for himself here, floating between lightweight and welterweight. He is the taller man by 3 inches. He has a 1-inch reach advantage. He is the younger man by 4 years, and he's been out of action for 11 months after his last fight, so that's worth noting as well. Now, Jake, overall, he's been losing to pretty darn good competition, but again, his last fight against Ben Saunders was probably a fight he should have won, or at least if he was still in that area where he can't beat the elite but beats most, he should have won, and he didn't. What does he have left? The loss of Saunders, he lost Saunders under 2 minutes. Saunders is another fading fighter with questionable durability that I thought Jake could have taken out. I had Jake to win that fight, and it didn't happen. Barberena's got 9 wins by knockout. He stopped Proctor. As I said, he's TKO Joe Ellenberger. He has a track record that suggests he can stop Jake and take advantage of some of the issues he's had. Barberena, he's landed more strikes than his opponent in all but one of his UFC fights, including 120 in the Alves fight. He's been a death by accumulation type guy, really puts it on his opponents and just keeps coming. He can do damage on the inside. He wants to brawl. He's incredibly durable. He just has 1 submission loss, which is his only loss by finish, so it shows how tough he is to get out of there. Looking at Jake, he's not landed more than 30 significant strikes since the Diego victory, mostly because of the knockout losses. The last time he went 3 rounds, he landed just 30 strikes against Tarek Saffiedine, so that tells you where he's at right now. I just don't think he has enough offense to deal with the volume of Barberena, even if he survives getting stopped. The key to beating Barberena so far in the UFC has been takedowns. Edwards landed 3, Colby Covington landed 12. Ground him, take his toughness and aggression out of the equation, and go from there. Ellenberger can wrestle, but he has never been a big takedown guy in the UFC. 1 completion over his last 7 fights, and again, some of that's moot by the fact that he can't seem to last that long without getting knocked out. But still, that's concerning. When I look at this, unless Jake can land that big knockout, be the first to stop Barberena, or completely wrestle him start to finish and really step out of the box, he's going to be hard-pressed to win this matchup. Again, he did stop Matt Brown, which was damn impressive, but Matt Brown's a guy who's notoriously had a bad body as far as taking strikes, and Jake capitalized on that. Barberena's not. And I think Barberena's going to pressure him, watch for those inside strikes, elbows and knees in the clinch. He might absorb some damage early, but ultimately he's going to get in there and do his job. And my prediction is Bryan Barberena to stop Jake Ellenberger and defeat him by TKO. Fight number 4 in the main card takes place in the women's strawweight division as the 11th ranked Cortney Cast Iron Casey, 7-5-0, takes on the 14th ranked former Invicta champion Angela Overkill Hill, 8 wins and 4 losses. Now, Casey has been fighting very good competition recently, but she's coming up just short. She's 1-3 in her last 4 bouts, including back-to-back frustrating split decision losses. Now, for Angela Hill, she's coming off a win over Marnia Moroz. She's 2-2 since coming back to the UFC, including a win over Ashley Yoder. For Casey, she's 4 inches taller than Hill. She'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and she's actually the younger fighter by 2 years. You look at Cortney Casey first. The big thing that stands out to her, to me anyway, she is 1-5 in fights that go the distance. That's incredibly poor record. She's had some bad luck. She's 1-6 overall in fights that go outside of the opening round, which is concerning against a tough fighter to finish in Hill. Conversely, Hill's 5-3 on the scorecards. She's gone the distance in 6 straight bouts and is 4-2 in the UFC, including 1 split decision win when she goes to the scorecards. Now, her takedown defense has been takedown defense for both girls has been a major issue if you look at their records. Casey gave up 3 in her loss to Michelle Waterson, 6 against Claudia Gadelha, 4 in her victory over Aguilar. Even going back to her early fight against Georgia Calderwood, she gave up 3 takedowns in that fight and lost as a result. For Hill, she had similar issues against Sasha Yoder, giving up 3. Jessica Andrade took her down twice. Tisha Torres took her down twice. So in both these girls' situations, if they can't stop the takedown and somebody can capitalize on that, that could be a key to victory here. Now, neither girl has a huge offensive wrestling game. Casey's the more likely to look for the takedown, I would think, and she's a better grappler overall. We've seen her have success on the mat. She's taken advantage of fighters that have taken her down and couldn't hold position and outmuscled them, and that's kind of what she could do here, because Hill has been known to attempt takedowns and kind of have mixed results. When you look at Casey's striking numbers, despite her struggles in longer fights, she's put up good volume. 103 against Aguilar, 91 against Eryk. Ultimately, in other fights, she has issues with her opponent's volume, but some of that's because, again, she's spending too much time on her back. Hill's put up some big numbers, 104 against Moraga, 107 against Ansarov, 89 against Jessica Andrade. Again, she can put up volume as well, and that's going to be her key to success here, is landing a lot of volume and avoiding the big power from Casey. Casey's very aggressive. She moves forward. She fights a little bit too linear at times, but she has that height and reach to help her land first against her opponents, and she's got that big power where she lands and it really changes the complexion of the fight. She was landing some big shots against Michelle Waterson, especially when Waterson stopped moving. Casey ultimately needs to cut off the cage here, not chase, not wait. She was waiting against Eryk way too much in that fight, and that probably cost her the bout. I like the way Angela Hill uses movement. She's in and out. She throws punches. She moves her head. I like that. She threw some nice low kicks in her last fight. She attacks outside of a jab when she's punching. She attacks the outside leg off of her jab. Sorry, I couldn't read my own writing there. She will throw a nice right hand, and she ends her combinations with that right hand after kicks, and I like that. In her last fight, as I mentioned, Hill was looking for takedowns. She had mixed results. She could go that route versus Casey, and if Casey gets taken down, we've seen her against a fighter who's not capable of keeping her down. Again, that actually works in her favor. I don't know how that will play out here. Hill has showed toughness against Andrade, but do you really want to trade with a bigger, more powerful girl in this situation? I don't think you do. Casey has a bad record in decisions, but all those fights saw her opponents land a number of takedowns. That's not what Hill's going to do. When opponents land 1 takedown or less, Casey has landed more strikes in all 4 fights, and she puts up decent volume overall. Hill needs to stay mobile, but she's going to get tagged when she moves forward, and she's too willing to absorb damage. I think Casey keeps vertical, stays active. That lack of a threat of a legit takedown is going to help her feel more comfortable. I think she's going to augment her own offense with the odd takedown and top position control. And my prediction is Cortney Casey to defeat Angela Hill by decision. Very well could be a split, close fight. Probably a close fight. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's featherweight division as Michael the Menace Johnson, 18-12-0, takes on Andre Touchy Fili, 18-5-0. Now, Michael Johnson is 1-0 since moving down to featherweight. He has also been finished in 3 straight fights. He is 1-5 in his last 6, but that one win was a destruction, a brutal knockout of top-ranked lightweight contender Dustin Poirier. Fili has won back-to-back fights coming into this matchup. In 3 of his last 4, he lost to Calvin Kattar in that one defeat, but he has wins over decision win over Artem Lobov and a split decision upset over Dennis Bermudez. I'm actually quite proud of the way these 2 last fights went. I had Fili over Bermudez, and I had Elkins over Johnson. Prior to the Bermudez fight, you could argue that he was having trouble getting big wins. He did take a Cochran Diaz, which was also a big win, but the Calvin Kattar kind of knocked him back. Fili, 1 inch taller, he'll have a 1 inch reach advantage, and he is the younger fighter by 4 years. Now, Johnson, he's fighting at featherweight again. Could be his last time, especially if he loses. If he's 0-2, he might recognize that making that cut down is not worth it. We'll see how things go. Now, MJ's a bit of an enigma. He's a good striker. He's got power. He moves well. He's fast. He has wins over Tony Ferguson. I know it was a bit ago. Edson Barboza and the aforementioned Dustin Diamond Poirier. That's a nice trio of victories, along with what else he's picked up. The big number that jumps off the page, though, is 8 losses by submission, including 2 of his last 3. And his cardio tends to be a bit of a concern, and It's cardio, submission defense, and wrestling defense that gets him in trouble. He is 4-7 in his last 11 fights to go outside of the first round, including each of his last 5 defeats. He got off to a great start against Elkins, lost. Good start against Gaethje, lost. Good start against Dariush, and lost a very close fight. Even he was starting strong against Diaz before fading. He hurt Nurmagomedov in the early exchange before getting absolutely smoked in that fight. You know, his hands did look very sharp against Elkins. He won the first round. I would say it was I don't know if it was a domination, but it was a fairly good round for Johnson. Landed some big shots, appeared to sting him on a couple of occasions. In the second round, he gave up the takedown and lost the fight. Most opponents that beat him tend to be more durable and deal with adversity fairly well and can rally, and that's what Elkins did. That's what other guys have done in the past. And the question is, can Andre Fili do that? Fili's coming off the first back-to-back wins of his career since entering the UFC, his UFC career. He has alternated wins and losses over his first 9 octagon fights. And he's coming off a very interesting performance where he landed 4 takedowns against Dennis Bermudez. He did actually get outlanded 103-80, but the takedowns played a big role. He didn't score a ton of top position time, but they still put up, they were still sizable. When you look at his track record, the guys he's beaten versus the guys that have beaten him, he's beaten guys that are a bit of a stunted strikers, that he has a bit of length and diversity over. Dennis Bermudez, Lobov, even Hakran Diaz. When you flip the script, look at the guys that beat him, guys like Max Holloway, Yair Rodriguez, and Qatar, all guys that Kelvin Cater, I always say Qatar, my apologies. All guys that are a little bit longer, able to match him with that length and a little more diversified as their strikers, more technically sound than the guys he beats. He carries a fairly good pace. He will mix in takedowns, as we just mentioned, but it's not his normal method of attack. He also tends to be a bit of a slow starter and can let his opponents get off to a good start, which is concerning against a guy like Michael Johnson, who comes out on strong very quickly. Now, you could say on the opposite side of things, well, Fili's a slow starter, but he tends to rally a little bit, which pigeonholes very nicely with what Johnson does badly, which is finish strong. He doesn't do that very well. I look at this fight and say, unless Fili can score takedowns or grind this one out, he's going to need to win the striking battle, and I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. I think he's going to struggle to deal with the speed of Johnson, the power. He gets hit a bit, too much for my liking, and I don't think his volume is there to match what Johnson brings. Fili's not a big submission threat. I think Johnson's going to hurt him on the feet. We've seen him hurt a couple times buzzed. We've seen him back off and let fighters dictate the pace. And especially if Johnson gets ahead and can keep pushing, Fili's going to struggle to keep up, and unless Johnson fades badly, my prediction is Michael Johnson to defeat Andre Fili by knockout. In the main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's lightweight division as the 7th-ranked former WSOF champion Justin the Highlight Gaethje, 18-2-0, takes on the 10th-ranked James the Texecutioner Vick, currently holding a record of 13 wins and 1 loss. Now, Gaethje, he's had an exceptionally difficult road since coming to the UFC, beating the aforementioned Michael Johnson in his first fight, followed by fights against Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier, back-to-back knockout defeats, the first 2 losses of his career. And that bout with Johnson was grueling. All 3 of them were grueling, demanding fights. Vick, he lost his first career bout back a couple of years, 2 years ago to Beneil Dariush. He has since won 4 in a row, and overall the guy is 9-1 in the UFC, including finishes in 3 of his last 4. That's damn impressive. We've also heard Justin Gaethje say if he can't win this fight, he is going to potentially retire, which is certainly, it's big talk. But 3 straight losses and a 1-3 record in the UFC, that's pretty close to, I'd say, being a bust, despite the fact his fights have been very entertaining. Vick, 6'3", 4 inches taller than Gaethje. He's a 6-inch reach advantage. He is the older fighter by a year, which is worth noting. Gaethje's style, overall, he likes to absorb damage, land his own damage, wear his opponent out, and eventually finish them. It worked in the WSOF. It worked against Michael Johnson. It did not work against Alvarez. It certainly did not work against Dustin Poirier. And the question is, where does Vick fit into that? Gaethje likes to shell up, land bombs. He landed 104 strikes against Johnson. Damn impressive. 122 against Alvarez and 115 against Poirier. All good totals. But in order to get there, he gave up some hellacious totals. He averages 8.67 strikes absorbed per minute over 3 UFC fights. That's a fuck ton of offense coming his way and landing. 91 significant strikes by Michael Johnson, 155 against Eddie Alvarez, and 174 by Dustin Poirier. That's way too much. Way too much. Vick's only been close to 106 strikes on 1 occasion. He landed 94 earlier in his career. He landed 68 against Trinaldo. He finished Duffy with just 42. He's not a guy who's put up these huge numbers, but his striking is getting better. When you look at Gaethje, he's going to want to fight Vick in close. He's going to want to brawl, shell up, then throw, land impactful strikes. Vick, though, he's long, he's got a good reach, he looks very big for the division. His distance management is becoming a key aspect of his fight. His jab is good, he throws good kicks, long punches. He's got more movement worked into his offense as well. He will pick away at his opponent, and he does a good job of limiting the damage coming back to his way. On his current winning streak, you look at the offense his opponents have put up, those striking totals are 11, 16, 25, and 26. His opponents over those last 9 rounds of competition have landed a combined 78 strikes. He's doing a good job of avoiding what Gaethje wants to, and that's brawl, land offense, and see who comes out on top. Gaethje could look to go for takedowns. Vick has had issues being put on the mat. He was taken down. He's given up 6 takedowns over his last 4 fights, but he's done a good job of getting back to his feet. And again, Gaethje wants to put on big, exciting fights and brawl with guys. Dariush did knock out Vick, landed some big shots, knocked him out. That seemed to be a turning point in how Vick fights and some of the skill set improvements he's made. Still, there's a legit concern that Vick gets tagged, but most of Gaethje's wins have come through breaking opponents down with volume and pressure before scoring the knockout. He had a couple of fights in WSOF where the damage was starting to add up, and it seemed like he had to rally in those fights to get the job done. And again, we saw that against elite-level competition, it just doesn't work. I think on his fight, James Vick's going to keep distance, limit the damage, land volume, and use Gaethje's pressure and willingness to take damage against him. Vick's style is also more suited to go deep into fights. This is another 5-round fight. And, Gaethje's fighting for the 3rd time in 9 months with the first 2 absolute wars. How much has that taken out of him? That's a great question. I think we'll find that out on Saturday night. But my prediction is James Vick to defeat Justin Gaethje by TKO. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 135. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. So will my bet packs, top to bottom. I break down the card for $15. Give you parlays, prop options, betting scenarios with stats to back them up, fantasy fight picks, all kinds of stuff. Tell you what fights to avoid if you can, as far as betting is concerned. And generally speaking, I do what I can to try and make you money. I can't guarantee it though. But as always, thanks for tuning in, and we got a busy end of the year coming up. Let's get after it. Take care, guys. Bye.